Hi, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Evanston Bound Quarantour series, brought to you by Artist Bookhouse. Each week we get to talk to some amazing book artists and writers, letterpress printers, and paper makers. It's such a good time. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Quarantour, brought to you by Artist Bookhouse. My name is Jamie Tomey, and I'm so excited today to be joined by the artist and author, Juan Martinez. And he and I are going to have an argument in a few minutes about whether or not he's an artist. So let me read your bio, Juan, before we start. Juan Martinez is the author of Best Worst American, a short story collection published by Small Beer Press. And he is the inaugural winner of the Neukom Institute Award for Debut Speculative Fiction. He lives in Chicago and is an assistant professor here at Northwestern University. His work has appeared in many literary journals and anthologies, including Glimmer Train, McSweeney's. I think this one is pronounced, you might need to jump in, Juan, Huizache?
It's actually, I think, Huizache.
Huizache. Oh,
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
Huizache. Ecotone, NPR Selected Shorts, Mississippi Review, and elsewhere. And actually not so much more forthcoming on Shenandoah. It's on the website, the story about the haunted school across the street. Visit and say hi at his website at fulmerford.com. Juan, welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
I'm so happy to be here, Jamie. Thank you for the intro and thank you for the invite.
Oh, yay! So usually we start with how did you become a book artist? How did you become a librarian? And I want to start with you with how did you become a writer? What was the story to your path towards becoming a writer?
So it was very winding. A lot of, I dropped out of college a bunch of times. Yes. But the short version of it was that I really wanted to be a filmmaker for a long time. I just loved movies. And I love to read. I'd always loved to read, but somehow I felt that I could do one thing, which would be movies. And eventually I realized that it was way cheaper to be a writer.
Yeah, than to be a filmmaker.
Exactly. So yeah, that's sort of how I started. And like my very first sort of writing related gig ever was I had just been like a year or two out of Colombia and into Florida, in Orlando. I was in Orlando because my dad was going to grad school. And there's this contest that the Orlando Central ran for their teen movie reviewers.
Oh, fun!
And I won it. So that was like my sort of like, I was a year of just free movies, which was excellent.
Oh, for you, yeah.
Yeah, but also I was writing, writing movie reviews on a deadline for, a fairly big newspaper.
Yeah.
So that was my first sort of writing gig.
For you, and how old were you when that happened?
I want to say I was like 15 or 16.
Wow, that is so cool. And so walk us through your collegiate going to college, dropping out, going back.
Okay, so it was really, I managed to do it in like 2 completely different continents, which is kind of impressive. So my dad got his PhD and I stayed behind to start my undergrad, and I dropped out.
And that was in Florida?
That was in Florida.
Okay.
So I dropped out, and then I went back to Colombia, and then the plan was to like try to do I forget what it was. It's called Philosophy and Letters in Colombia. So it's like this sort of broad humanities thing because I dropped out of that, and I think I was supposed to go to architecture school. Because I don't even know why. That was also a bad idea. And I ended up writing for about a year and a half for an English language newspaper in Colombia. And then eventually I went back to the US and started going back to my undergraduate, which was also the only way I could stay in the US was by, having
By
a
being
student
in
visa.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So eventually, though, because of that, I ended up, I started writing. I had an amazing creative writing professor that I had my first summer that I was there. And eventually, like, she was my thesis advisor when I got my master's in creative writing
Yeah.
in Orlando. So yeah, it's very, it's a
It's
little
a
bumpy,
winding, yeah, it
very
seems
winding.
like it was a winding path, but it kind of was. I'm getting the sense that it your being a writer was always there, and just the winding around back to, it was sort of like a Mobius strip
Yeah.
in a way. Like you were a writer when you were a teenager, and then you kind of wound around and came right back where you started in a way.
Yeah, I think that I was doing my best to do the things that I thought you're supposed to do when you're in school. And the only things I was really excited about were like was making stuff and reading. I mean, always
And
that
reading.
was the,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that seems like a through line theme for these quarantors is people talking about what they should do or what they're supposed to do, but then ending up doing what they're meant to do.
yeah.
So I love that. And then how did you end up teaching writing?
So that was sort of accidental too. I was I got my PhD not in writing, not in creative writing, but in literature,
Mm,
specifically contemporary American literature, but also a little bit of mid-century literature. Like my
yeah.
sort of central area of study was, Vladimir Nabokov,
Yes,
the
yeah,
Russian
yeah,
American writer who wrote Lolita and
yeah,
Benin and Pale Fire
yeah.
and all these things. And me and my wife were kind of set. I think we were thinking about technical writing or stuff like that right after graduation. And I just sort of said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and submit a couple of, you know, academic
Yeah.
applications.
Yeah.
And I had a really amazing mentor and advisor. Her name is Ann Stevens. She's at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who sort of really helped me get all my materials ready.
Uh-huh.
And it happened to be a year where there were a number of jobs that were specifically looking for people who had a PhD in literature, but also could teach creative writing, but also had like a track record of publications in creative writing.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of the right moment to be applying for those
For
jobs.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you have fallen into all these things, and I love that. I
I
love
don't.
that. Like
Yeah.
again, the things that you're meant to do have
Yeah.
found you in a
It's
way.
been, yeah. There's a part of me that always feels exceedingly lucky. I mean, there's a lot of work involved, but
Of
there's
course.
also a lot of
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your wife's a writer too, or
My
is
wife,
she?
yes, she is an amazing writer. She's finishing up her novel right now, but she's had a number of stories out in the world. Yeah, no, she's awesome. She's
That's I love
yeah,
that. So you have a very bookish household.
we do. We're kind of hoping our son turns out to be an engineer, or yes,
To take
yes,
care of you in your old age
that's
with
the plan. Yeah,
all the money. I love
yeah,
that. How about we move to sharing your office door?
yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to do this, and just to the people who are here, hi Ruth, and everybody else. I'm so glad that I get to share this with you all. So I realized that I have not seen my office in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. You
You know,
guys are
not
off. You are teaching on Zoom right now, right? Everything
Yes,
is
all
remote.
Zoom all the time.
Yeah. Because I know they were going to try to do at Northwestern, they were going to try to do some of the people
Yeah,
in, but okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Can you?
I've chosen to do all Zoom,
Okay.
and there are some people who are coming into the office. I've chosen not to come into the office. Like completely respect everybody's.
Yeah. Of course. Of
Yeah, but
course.
I haven't really needed to. So that was the choice. I realized that I was missing my office, and then I thought I would share photos of it just so I
just so
talk a
we can
little bit
see
about
it.
it. Also, it's all going to have a tour, right? Yes.
Yeah. Oh, this is
So,
great.
and
Yeah.
also to talk a little bit about like this odd relationship between like different kinds of creative processes and
Yeah.
a true line, as we've been talking, Jamie, about my life, which part of it is just goofing off, right? Not going to school, dropping
Yeah.
out, not doing
Yeah.
the things I'm supposed to do. And if there's artists out there, writers out there, I just want to make a giant case for the importance of goofing off a little bit.
Goofing off. I love it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
let me go ahead
Yes.
and
So
give
go ahead
you,
and screen share.
I'm going to go ahead and do the screen share. And then here it is. So everybody, I wanted to go and tell you a little bit about uh, my office door. And I guess I'm saying this as though I was, yes, I am absolutely totally somebody who believes in the importance of just goofing off a little bit. One of the things that happened was that I've been working on a novel, and I made myself uh, basically revise every day. And if I revised, I got to do something else as a treat. And
Oh.
so, right. So the treat in this case was that I would get to doodle.
Oh,
And
I
because
love this.
right. And so because I knew that I didn't want to spend too much time doodling, I decided, all right, you know what? It can only be a single Post-it.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is I became slightly obsessed with the idea of covering the entirety of my office door with the doodles. And shortly at the beginning of this year, I was able to do so. So like the entirety of my office door is now
Full
post
of
office
doodles.
doodles, Post-it
I
doodles.
love this. And now, so of course, during the quarantines, I completely interrupt all the time.
Please, please do.
First of all, one thing that I love is that you set yourself a parameter where you had these sort of rigid boundaries you had to stick within, such as you couldn't doodle until you were done revising for the day, and that it had to be this certain size and material. But what my question, I guess, is for me as an artist, when I set myself up on those parameters, I might have like a whole bunch of paper and just be so blocked because it's this vast awesomeness of materials and I can't make a decision. But to set yourself up with this parameter, did you find that it helped to open things up a little bit, or was it kind of a struggle?
No, absolutely. And this is actually something that I do both as a writer and as a doodler and as a teacher is I think that we are at our most creative when we set up intentional roadblocks for ourselves, right?
Oh,
Uh,
intentional roadblocks. I
right.
love that.
And I think, I'm trying to remember, I think his name is Shopson. His daughter, Shopson's New York chef guy, but you know, also a bit of an artist. And the way that his wife described, here's a book that's a memoir about her relationship with him, and I think the the title was "Stupid Arbitrary Rules."
Oh, I love that.
Right, which I think that's actually something that I believe in. That it doesn't really matter. It matters to some degree, but like the important thing is that there are rules. It's okay if
Yeah.
the rules are a little bit arbitrary. And in my case, just having the Post-its was definitely helpful. And then when I'm writing the novel, when I'm writing short stories, I also end up setting up very definitive rules so that I kind of know what it is that I'm doing. And then also every day, like when I'm writing or drafting or revising, I also, you know, create little boundaries for what it is that I'm doing, so I don't feel overwhelmed, like you said, like by all the pages that are blank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah.
So talk us through this post-it situation too. Though, are these different colored post-its because they're colorful?
Oh, they're
Um,
yeah. I definitely do. I actually do. Just this is actually one of the arbitrary rules is that they're all yellow Post-its.
Yellow post-its.
Yes,
Okay,
and then
and then you're
sometimes.
layering. Go ahead. I'm
And
sorry.
then it's just colored pencils and
Oh,
some and cheap ink. And then every once in a while, I guess I can do
yeah.
this. Why not? And I'll so every once in a while I'll go ahead and do. I would do little intentional patterns. So I can
Yeah.
go ahead and give you. This is the pigeon block, and it was
The
all
pigeon block.
pigeons.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then,
Oh, this is fantastic.
I guess this was the ballpoint pen block. So it's all ballpoint pens. And then just green for some reason.
Yeah.
And then
And
that
this is
last one.
like during a certain week, you say, I'm just going to do green this week or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
And then,
okay, the one that you're just highlighting right now, I'm fascinated by this.
oh, this one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, I think that one was just like kind of sad, fleshy, lumpy foreground object and blue background. I think that was the rule.
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
That's
And
so cool.
yes. So these are some of them. And then I've been keeping it up during quarantine a little bit. I've been doing a few of these, and I wanted to show you some of the ones that I've been doing.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
always as a reward for the days that I've done some work.
Yeah. So now I have another question.
Yeah.
Is this only for revision work, or is this also for like word count?
Any work, I think is
Any work.
is the rule.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
for the last couple of months, it has been revision because that's the thing that I've been focusing on.
Yeah.
But now that I'm done revising, it's just any kind of work that I do that's not, being I guess, a kind of middling teacher's aide in virtual kindergarten and or Zoom professor.
Sure. Which is very similar. Which is what I'm teaching undergrad and kindergarten.
I actually lucked out. I have like the best seminar this quarter. I don't know what happened, but they're really good.
I love it. Okay, do you want to show us some of your quarantine ones?
So let me go ahead and show you some of my quarantine ones. So I think this is one of the very, very first ones, and I don't know what was going on other than I may have. I think there was the point where people were freaking out about like picking up groceries and yes, and I was like, I'm not going to draw the coronavirus, but and then I think I ended up drawing
a version of it.
Yeah. Yes.
I love the little like fingernail claw thingies on there.
I'm sorry, what?
The fingernail claw thingies.
Oh yeah, the fingernail claws.
I love that.
Thank
and then
you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask another technical question. When you start to doodle, which is what you're calling it, and so I want to respect that. But so I just also don't want to get into an argument about whether artists, because we define ourselves, but I think you're an artist as I define you. But so when you start to do the doodle, do you have something in mind before you doodle, or you just kind of like start to draw?
Some of them are very, very planned, and then some of them are not. This one is not. This one was definitely one of the ones that was just sort of very free formed. But some of them I do rough out in pencil before I do. Yeah.
And then you sort of have the thought of,
and then I have the thought.
Right. So then another question since you're not going into your office to put these on your office door, where do these live in your home?
Oh, I can go ahead and show you. So a lot of these, and this is I just realized might be a branded thing, but I can show you all. These are often in little field notes.
Oh, I love it!
So here's,
Yay!
That's where
now,
they live.
Did you see that Field Notes did a collaboration with a bunch of letterpress artists?
I saw those. Those were beautiful.
So gorgeous.
Yes.
Okay, so back to you though. I love that. So then when you go back to the office, are these going to go back on the door, or are they going to live in the Field Notes?
No, they're going to go back on the door. I think that's one of the ways in which I've... the other thing is that at this point, the door has gotten to the point where it is so completely full that every time I have to put a new one in, I have to pull another one out.
Oh, so you have to curate.
I have, which is nice because it also gives me makes me feel like, there's like, they're not just sort of moldering in
I love that. And then when you take it off the door, does it go into its own little...
Yes. I'm sorry, I actually did have all these notebooks together. So I actually am a huge fan of like the cheap composition books.
Yeah.
And so I have a composition book that's just full of
the Postits. I love this.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like your daily diary in a way, as well.
Well, I was going to say that's actually part of it because as the quarantine and our isolation just sort of kept happening, we're
Oh,
actually now living in a place that is surrounded by groundhogs.
oh, ho, 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 ho.
And
So
so,
it's like every single day, Groundhog Day. Yeah.
yes, so I get to count the groundhogs, I get to see them. And so now I've been drawing them. I've also been writing a lot about the groundhogs, just partly as an obsession, partly just because they're there, and partly because there's a lot of material in the groundhogs for some
Yeah.
reason. And so I'm just uh, so. But I decide I don't know why, but this particular groundhog had just won a medal, and so I just wrote the
Oh,
medal on it.
medal for groundhogging.
Yes,
Um, so I just am going to interrupt real quick because
please.
Maria, of course, is here, our resident librarian of awesome Quarantor librarian. So she found the Field Notes quarterly edition, fall 2020 letterpress, and of course, our favorite. Two of our past Quarantor guests are in Pack B, so she's just
Ooh.
plugging that one
Oh, I'm
for.
glad that we're getting the
Yeah.
plug-in. That is
So
so
I am
cool.
so glad that you are using those too, because Field Notes is a really great company.
Oh, I
Um,
love them.
yeah,
Yeah,
so we don't know why this groundhog won its medal, but this little guy won a medal. Okay,
absolutely.
I love this.
Yes.
He's very
Uh, yes. Oh, well, yeah. I think there's an elaborate story for the groundhog winning the medal, but we don't have to.
Oh no, I'm
Yeah.
so curious. I mean, just give us the touching points.
The
Just
touching point. Okay,
yeah.
so this is the very short version of this, and I've told this story a few times. Is that when my wife and I were in Austin one day, we were by the river walk, and there was all these children who were uh, feeding bread to this beautiful otter that they found.
Oh.
Uh, and then a woman walked by, and then she said, "That's not an otter. That's a river rat."
Oh.
Yes. And then ever since then, I've kind of fallen in love with the idea of just animals, cute animals that are mistaken for cuter animals.
Yeah. I love
Right.
that.
But also for anybody who has imposter syndrome, like this feeling that
Yeah.
like, oh my God, that always felt to me like the best sort of like stand-in for anybody who feels that they've gotten something like an award that they did not deserve.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. That's quite a
Yeah.
metaphor. Yeah.
Yes. So like, just if you're a river rat and people think you're an otter, just
Just go with it.
go with it. You're still getting bread, right? That's
Yeah. You're
the
still getting bread. I love
yeah,
it. Ah,
yeah.
okay.
All right.
Yeah. He's
So
very
I'm
cute.
gonna go ahead and, and move on
Good.
to
Yeah, of course.
this was just a
Oh,
very yes. So that's obviously the Willis Tower
yeah.
and Picasso monument, but it's very important. They're maintaining social distance.
Oh,
Yeah,
yay.
being
They're
very very careful.
eyeballing each other.
Yes,
I love it. Oh my
and
God.
um, so the place that I have, the place that we're in right now, has a backyard, and we hadn't had a backyard for a while. Um, and so this particular drawing is, I was there. I was actually I was just cleaning up in the backyard, and
Yeah.
there was a piece of shredded plastic that they use for the weeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looked for a moment like this monstrous centipede,
Oh,
way because it has all these
all the little
little
legs.
barbs. So I just put some eyes on it, and that was what I yeah,
And that's this little
that's this guy.
kind of
So
creepy, loving
yes,
centipede guy. Oh, I
therapy guy.
love
So
it.
yeah, so that's all part of it is just recording the stuff that shows up every day.
Yeah.
Uh, but then I think as the quarantine progressed, things started to get a little bit more strange because I was sort of looking. I just realized that I was feeling like we were inside a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, well, what if we're inside and then people like the things that I've been looking at outside decide that they're kind of curious about us.
Yeah. So they
So
start eyeballing you.
they started. So that was a bird uh, just looking into the blinds. Um, and then I realized, well, if they're just coming into the blinds, what if they just want to play Dungeons and Dragons with you? So this is this was a Robin
Waiting
that
for the
really,
game to start. Yeah.
yeah, they're just waiting.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, and I guess I'll go to do the last one, and then we can just talk a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been telling my students and also telling myself and sort of is that oftentimes uh, it's really healthy to be aware of the things that you're drawn to a lot.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I'm working on right now is actually taking uh, the
Ooh.
doodles, some of the doodles that I've been doing, and actually turning them into a story that's kind of told in tweets.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so the idea
So
is
are you
just
adding text to them or are you just tweeting the imagery?
so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a drawing alongside like a fairly short Twitter text.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and I'm still messing around with it, but that's part of the joke is it's I'm writing a bunch of short stories that all have to have. Remember, I talk about like stupid arbitrary rules.
yeah.
So the stories that I've been writing for like the last 2 years are stories that are they have a couple of rules. One of them is they have to be set in Chicago. Um,
Yes.
but the second rule is that every story has to have at least one affiliated app with it.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So I've written already like a Twitter story and a Facebook story. The school story actually is a real estate app.
Uh,
So
yeah,
it's
because you mentioned, I think in there, I can't remember how you're looking up Zillow or
Zillow and Redfin.
you're
Yeah,
looking up, you're looking up your condo or the character is
the
looking up
characters. Yeah,
condos. Yeah, condos
and
value. Yeah.
yeah, and this is sort of like my complicated love letter to Chicago's weather. So
Yeah.
it's going to be like I think it's going to be either WeatherBug or AccuWeather. I think AccuWeather has like some interesting political weirdness behind it. So I may just
Okay.
do AccuWeather for the fun of it.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but the story, I don't mind spoiling most of it. Like one of the things that I'm navigating with is my own incapacity to actually, now that I have a phone app for the weather, to insist that the phone app's weather is the real weather, even if like, so if I'll step out, I'll say, hey, it's not raining, and then
You'll
uh,
go outside and
I'll
it'll
go
be
outside and
raining.
it's raining, but it's like, but AccuWeather said it's not raining, so it's not raining, right?
Right, right.
Yeah,
This disconnect between the two. So
exactly.
when you flash to this slide, I looked at it, I saw the long march,
Hmm.
and it the just the words the long march made me think of not the month of March being long, but of the drudgery of every day, and we're walking through this and it's continual and all of that. So it's kind of got a double meaning
Yeah,
in
I mean,
in a way.
it has a. I was gonna say it's also a really it has a triple meaning, right? Not
Oh,
that it matters, but like those are the most important, like the ones that I think are were there. But there's also, of course, the actual like Chinese communist long march.
long march. Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit about like one of my, I don't know, I'm trying to remember. I think it was Pritzker when he was running for governor. Uh, they had this ad and they asked him, "Hey, what's your favorite season?" And then he said spring,
Yeah.
and I was like, "How is that even
How,
possible?" Right?
how's that possible? Right.
Because we don't have a
Right.
spring, right?
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit of a meditation on the fact that like March and a little bit of April and a little bit before March, it just feels like it's one never-ending, you know.
Dreary, bleak.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you for walking us through your
yeah.
office
Here,
story
I'll
and
go
your.
ahead and stop.
So one of the questions that I had down to ask you was how has your work changed during the quarantine and during this time, or has it? And clearly it has with your drawings, but has your writing process changed at
It
all
ha-
during quarantine?
yeah, it has. It's been harder to write.
Mm.
Um, it's been easier to doodle.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
I wonder
and
why that is.
Well, part of it is just the amount of, I think, brain space that you need for like a long, sustained
Yeah.
narrative can is a little bit feels like I don't quite have it. I've been waking up a little bit early when I can to write, but generally it's just been uh, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But one thing that I'm doing and um, that I've been trying to have some students that I love who are amazing writers who I just can't remember is that we are in kind of really strange, extraordinary times.
Hmm.
And that one of the few tasks that we can do right now is just to take notes. You know,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it's. I wish it were mine. It's actually George Saunders. He has
Oh,
a beautiful, uh, beautiful sort of bit of article in the New Yorker, and it's just called "Letter to My Students," where he.
oh, okay. I'll
Yeah,
look that up. Or Maria can drop it into the chat because I'm sure she's already on
awesome.
it. Maria's
Well,
Maria,
yeah.
we have another library request.
Maria's awesome.
George Saunders.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and talk us through that while she's looking for the article.
Oh no! So this is one of the things that he's talking about is that like you take the long view of history, right?
Mhm.
There's always precarity. There's always sort of great insecurity, and I guess I'm trying to remember like the way he says that basically living in the world is like being a very, very small and being in the back of a tiger, and we
Oh,
kind of forget that the tiger will move or convulse every once in a while, and that'll mess with us. Right.
yeah.
So I thought that was actually so this is one thing that I keep reminding myself, even on days that I'm not fully writing. If I'm taking notes, if I'm just sort of jotting stuff down, it's still good work.
It's still good work. I love that. And Maria has dropped it into the chat, the George Saunders, um, a letter to
Yeah.
my students as we face the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, speaking about your work and being at home, you have a small child. How
I
is
do.
that? How does that work for your time to carve out for writing and doodling
So
and
one of
and
the
goofing around?
yeah. So one of the things that's been really good is our virtual kindergarten. I know that people's experiences have been challenging.
Hmm.
Uh, we actually have a very good kindergarten situation. Yeah, so he's been great, and we've been great. One of the things that we've been able to do is that we've been able to have sort of been able to switch off days so that
Oh, yeah.
so we have a very flexible schedule, and so that means that usually on Mondays and Wednesdays, which are my heavy teaching days, my wife is usually taking care of him, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm in charge. Uh,
Yeah.
so it works out really, really well for the most part,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it does mean that we have, I think, all of us like enough time to be, you know, uh, at the very least, be there for the teaching and be there for yeah, have some
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah, for the family.
yeah,
So okay, let me go back to my list of questions.
you got it.
So you've talked about being a movie lover, and I'm
Yes.
assuming that loving movies. I want to adapt this question to also loving movies. So, what other writers or filmmakers have influenced you throughout your life, and why?
I
Because
have.
I feel like
Yeah.
those ways of telling a story, like reading is, and listening to stories and watching stories, it's all just kind of a gathering. So, what other people, artists, visual artists, or writers or filmmakers have influenced your work and your life?
I would say, I mean, there's a list that could give you just from like very formative people from when I was becoming a writer, and George Saunders would absolutely be like on top of that list for me, as
Yeah.
just hugely, hugely so. Nabokov, right? I started reading him, and then there's a bunch of weirdo 19th century British novelists that I adore, especially Anthony Trollope. He's just one of my
Oh, yeah.
all-time favorite people. Uh, but these days, I was going to say there's a number of people who I just really, really admire. Honestly, Kelly Link, who's she's my editor at Small Beer, along with Gavin Grant, but she's an amazing writer in her own right. She's somebody I really admire. Linda Berry is one of my favorite people these days. And then visual artists, there's always weird ones that I've been in Chicago now since 2013, and there's a bunch of like weirdo Chicago people that I can't shake off.
Yeah.
Henry Darger
Oh,
is absolutely
yeah.
at the
Totally.
very top of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's somebody whose work I return to often. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Creepy and
creepy.
weird and just so layered and such a story in the work.
Absolutely.
And one thing I remember, because he was an outsider artist, he wasn't
Yes.
professional. And so they found all of this work of his. And I remember, I can't remember if it was the MCA or the Art Institute. And it might have been the MCA back, this was way before you were in Chicago, but they were not in the big, beautiful building, but they were on like a side street. But for some reason, I think it might have been the Art Institute where they had the entire book
Oh
spread
wow.
out in
Wow.
the room, and you could just go and just look at these little tiny meticulous drawings. It was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And who else of these creepy Chicago
Oh, the
artists?
Cuban Chicago artist. Well, I just realized that my brain is scrambled, and actually, it's the Chicago street photographer as well. Who,
Oh yes,
yeah,
what's her name? Which I just used her work in a professional development with teachers to do a looking at art thing.
yeah. I
Oh my
can't believe I
gosh,
just sort of
it
completely.
just went out of my
Maria,
head
can you help
too.
us?
Maria, can you help us? Or Ben?
Literally have. Uh,
Um,
yeah. But
Yes,
she's,
yes, Vivian Meyer.
yeah,
Yes,
Vivian
that's
Meyer.
who I'm
Yes,
talking about. Thank
yes.
you,
So
Katie.
she's
Yes.
somebody. Thank you so
Also,
much.
so
So
you respond to people who are not considered or who may not consider themselves artists or aren't considered artists by the big huge art world,
yeah,
and but they are,
yeah.
and yet you don't call yourself an artist, but you are.
Yeah, so I think maybe there's some sympathy
Yeah,
or just sort of some
just
sympathetic
a
sort of
connection there.
vibrations.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely.
There's part of it is that part of it is the yeah, maybe that's
Yeah,
some of it, and part of it is just the sort of weird juxtaposition of like really interesting formal mastery that they have with the fact that their work just slips into these sort of unplaceable categories that I find
yeah.
really compelling. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what your Postits do, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, so filmmakers, movies that have
Oh
influenced.
man. I mean, there's some very, very obvious ones, right? I think like David Lynch for me is just one of those people that
Yeah,
I've been, but and the super formative one, and I mean, American Utopia just came out. Spike Lee did an amazing job with that. But I'm a really huge fan of David Burns's entire project, like
yeah,
the music. But True Stories, that movie that he did back in the '80s, is just one of my favorite things ever.
I love that. And did you
Yeah.
see them on? Did you see him on Saturday Night Live where they had all the dancers and everybody's wearing the same suit? Did you see
Well,
that?
I have
That
not
was
seen
at
it,
the beginning of
but
the
that's
pandemic.
American Utopia. That's part of
Is
the.
that part of it?
Yes.
Okay, I love
Do you
that.
remember what song he did for that? He's
I
covered Janelle Monáe.
don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw several different clips, and some of them were from Saturday Night Live, and some
Okay.
of them were just other clips of different pieces I saw. I can't remember
Yeah.
because this was, years ago,
Oh
back in
yeah.
the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes.
back,
Yeah, a million
back
years
so
ago.
many years. Yeah, several months ago, which feels like years. Okay, so next question: speculative fiction. Talk us through your process on and like creepy factor and just
Wow.
dread,
So
dread.
yeah, so one of my first loves as a reader was horror fiction. I love horror fiction and science fiction. So those were sort of like where my genre love began. And one of the things that happens uh, in for good ways and in good ways actually is that when you read some more, you're sort of gently and maybe sometimes not so gently pushed toward other strands of literature, which is fantastic, right? So you read
Yeah,
way
yeah,
more than the stuff that you're interested in, even if it doesn't have any severed heads, right?
yeah,
Or like not
yeah.
as many severed heads as
Or
maybe
maybe
you'd
not
want
as
to.
obvious that the heads are severed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Sometimes the severed head is emotional, right?
yeah.
Or whatever. Like, uh, so like that's the. So there's been, um, there was a moment I think when I was writing, and I was just writing these stories that were a little bit absurdist or fabulous, that were had some elements of science fiction or horror, but weren't really straight up and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the novel that I'm working on is just I'm very excited about it, but it's straight up horror. It's like a
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
And it's set in Chicago.
Actually, the stories are set in Chicago, so I have like those stories that are sort of working toward a collection,
Okay.
and the novel is set in Las Vegas. And
Oh.
I lived in Las Vegas for while I was getting my PhD. So
And so Las Vegas being the setting of a horror novel,
yes,
that makes sense.
yeah, totally. It's it wasn't a hard sell, but
It wasn't a
yeah,
hard sell for
yeah.
yourself to do. So, so as you're writing, if you were trying to write something that isn't necessarily horror or having those elements, do they still creep in for you? And creep in, like I don't that pun not
Yeah.
intended, but
No, I know what you mean. Yes, actually, the I think the uh, a good rule of thumb, and I think that this maybe applies across all art, maybe, but it's the idea that you don't want to be working in with only one color or one
one
topic, right?
shade.
So yeah, one
Yeah.
shape. So I think usually the balance is often, oh, if something is very comic, there should be something sad in it, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there's a story that maybe whose central impulse is to provide comfort, then there has to be this sort of layer of unease underneath it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
obviously, the opposite is the thing. If you're out to really scare the pants off somebody, you also have to think about like, you know, are there other notes, right? Is
Yeah.
there an element of humor or an element of
Comfort.
comfort
Even
or
if it's a very tiny bit of comfort at some point. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my gosh. And so how do you balance those for yourself and for your readers? Like the
yeah.
technical point of the writing of it.
So I think
Is
a lot
that
of
in revision or is that in
that's in
first draft?
revision. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's sometimes your impulses are right the first time around, but that's rare. I feel
Mhm.
that oftentimes uh, sort of figuring out like the tonal shifts and making sure those tonal shifts feel like they make sense
Yeah.
is something that happens in revision an awful
Yeah.
lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, and we only have about 13 more minutes left, so I want to. I have like 50,000 more questions
No
for you,
worries.
but
Yeah.
no time.
Yeah.
So all of this month we've been sort of delving into haunted stories and haunted art and the idea of that discomfort and the dread. And one of the questions that keeps coming up for me at least is the juxtaposition or the combination of grief and loss and trauma in horror and scary stories
Yeah.
and why that seems to appear and work. And that's not really a question yet for you, but can you talk us through your theories on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that there's two sort of like things that a lot of people who love horror connect will say about that. Which is that it's not that trauma and horror and all this stuff is stuff that lives in those stories, right? It's like it is life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
it is a part of life, right? And
Right.
so the appeal of horror is, I think, is allows us to sort of live through it in some ways,
Without
and
actually physically living through it.
exactly, and
Yeah.
it's a way to sort of anticipate domestic, and oftentimes domesticate, I think, is a really good word for it, because it's so much of it, so much of really great horror happens in the domestic sphere, right?
Yeah.
Homes, families,
Haunted. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. But a lot of it is domestic. I think also domesticated in the sense of like maybe acknowledging or giving voice to like a really scary thing that you know in your heart of hearts you may have to face at one point or another, right? Like loss of a loved one, it would be
Yeah.
like a really big one, or loss of your own self, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then just sort of like read a story where that happens, but it has a tidy beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And so I think that's really one of the reasons why horror can be such a powerful force for uh, sanity, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. So yeah, and then also thinking about the idea of, um, and we were talking about this last week with Landis Blair, uh, facing the world in a way that we can deal with it, because generations before us used to have to deal with death and loss in a
Absolutely.
very upfront way. So horror kind of going, or like spooky stories, I guess, kind of going through that idea. So what are you reading right now? What are some of the things that and okay,
Yeah.
this is another thing that we've been talking about pandemic wise. I had a hard time being able to read at the beginning, and like still I'm not reading as many books as I normally do. So can you speak to that as
Oh
well?
yeah. So number one is, yeah, I'm not reading as much as I was reading, and that is like for anybody who's feeling that, that is fine. I mean, there's stuff that I'm reading for the class that I'm teaching, and it's awesome stuff. So it's not a
Yeah.
burden. Uh, but the stuff that I'm reading beyond that, that I'm really excited about and that is really useful, is I'm reading Ali Broche's Solutions and Other Problems, which is her new
Oh,
book. Uh,
okay. I
I don't know
haven't
if
heard
you've.
of that one.
So
Huh.
she's known for a book that she did a couple of years ago called Hyperbole and a Half, and it's a really,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
and actually, speaking of somebody who's sort of brilliant at like formal constraints, right? She was somebody who did uh, all the drawings for that first book with just MS Paint, right? Like with literally
With
just
just what?
with Microsoft Paint, like the
With
default.
Mike? Oh my gosh.
Yes,
I had no idea. Okay.
yeah. So and they're awesome. They're really beautiful drawings, right? So uh, that's it's so Solutions and Other Problems by Ali Broche is really really good, really funny. It's actually uh, there was a I'm not going to spoil it, but she has this chapter where she talks about being 3 years old and becoming really obsessed with uh, the neighbor inside
Mm.
the other house, because she had never realized that other people lived in other houses because she's 3, right?
Oh.
So she starts getting out of her house at night through the cat door and going
Oh,
inside her neighbor's house, and she starts stealing stuff and
as
putting
a
it in a drawer
three-year-old. Oh my
as a
goodness.
3-year-old, until she eventually decides to steal her neighbor's cat. It is so good. It's a great, the whole book is fantastic, but
Okay. I will
yeah,
look for that one. I'll put a hold on it at the library as
it
soon as we
is
get off
really
of the
worth it. It's amazing.
conversation. Thank you for the recommendation. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming today.
So,
Thank you, everyone, for coming to this week's Evanston Bound Tour with Juan Martinez. Juan, it was such a pleasure talking to you. And I
it was
appreciate.
so much fun, Jamie.
Oh my gosh. And I have so many more questions. Maybe we do a follow-up tour when your book comes out, or we can actually have coffee in person at some
That
point.
would be nice.
So for those of you who are watching, if you haven't yet ordered your A House Haunted merchandise from our threadless shop, please do so. It's going to disappear in a ghostly fashion in a little bit, and everything supports Artist Bookhouse and our mission, of course. Thank you for coming. Hi again. Thank you so much for watching this week's Foreign Tour. We really appreciate your support. If you want to learn more about our guest from today, please read the description below. And if you'd like to support more programming like this, coming from Artist Bookhouse, please visit our website at artistbookhouse.org/donate. Thank you again for joining us.